I call to order the Oregon City Commission work session of August 13th. The roll call, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Rocky Smith. Here. Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Mayor Dan Holliday is absent this evening, and President Frank O'Donnell.
Here. In terms of future agenda items, anyone have anything they want to offer?
Yes, in light of some information that we received by email, I would like to have a discussion at a future meeting regarding the revocable permit that we talked about previously.
Understood. I believe we all received an email that said we had insufficient or inaccurate information, and if that wants to be reconsidered.
I didn't say reconsider, I said I'd like to have a further discussion regarding that new information.
I use the two terms interchangeably.
Okay, sounds good.
So
Would you please
that
put that
was
on future agenda?
that was a commission, city commission approval?
It was,
Would you like that as at a commission meeting or a work session?
I think commission meeting would be appropriate. That's where the last
Either
decision was
one.
made. And then introduce this new information. I don't know if you've seen it in the form of a letter from a citizen that said that the staff report was absent some critical information as to effective dates. And if you put that into it and we have that discussion or reconsideration, either term,
Okay.
we can just do that. Any other future agenda items by anyone present, audience or members up front? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 19-466, a discussion of the list of future work session agenda items.
Oh, it's 2 and 2A.
We just did.
Sorry, I thought that's where we were.
Oh, okay, I thought
Oh.
I didn't know if you wanted to summarize the list, Tony, or not, as far as, it was all over the map. There's, what do you say?
I think it's helpful. We're going to start addressing, we've got a lot of these addressed through September, into October, we're already out. So we will try to, look at some of the ones that were a little bit higher priority. Have a discussion about the Kenema obstructions and the rights of way. Seemed to be one that that ranked higher, that we had not already started working on. So, it's helpful, and we're continue to kind of make our way through the list.
Okay. And we'll move on to item 3A. These are tonight's discussion items. Of course, the purpose of a work session is to get input from all concerned parties and have that exchange with your commission. So the first item up is 19-465. It's the OC Together Initiative. Mr. Conkle is listed as the sponsor, and I presume we'll have speakers that will speak in this behalf.
Yeah, so the commission had asked us to put together an opportunity for a presentation in discussion with representatives from OC Together, the Oregon City School District, and the City of Oregon City regarding prevention of marijuana use among Oregon City's youth population. This would be an opportunity to discuss how these various groups and agencies can collaborate and work toward the same missions. So I know we have several folks from the school district, OC Together, and Oregon City Police Department. So I'm thinking maybe we can have everybody kind of sit up so we can all be in the conversation at the same time rather than just having folks come up separately. So
That would work.
if
Let's
I
do
can
that.
invite OC Together, PD, Oregon City School District, then we'll kind of do maybe introductions once everybody kind of gets situated. Or if you want to just come up and grab a spot with a mic, we'll get out of the way. And if you want to sit on the sides where John is.
Yeah.
We'll do right here.
Yeah, so everybody can have a mic.
So there's 2 mics right there in the front, and then there's 2 on either side. Okay. Brian, you're in the hot spot.
Hey,
Here, Brian.
Brian, you can come up there too.
There's a familiar
He's
seat over
already
there.
in trouble, so he's already in trouble, so I don't think I'd get him into any other trouble.
So who would like to initiate the discussion?
Well, why don't we start with introductions first, so we can start
Okay.
with Superintendent Tidway.
It's already on.
You're-
All right, I'm Larry Didway, Superintendent for Oregon City School District, and I'm here as a member of the Oregon City Together Coalition. I serve on the board, and the school district has a very tight relationship with this organization that does a lot of great things to help us prevent drug and alcohol use in our youth, and obviously the school district has a strong interest in those prevention efforts. Oregon City Together has been a great partner for us. In addition to my own membership with the school board, or not the school board, the board for the Oregon City Together, we also provide housing for the office for this organization. We also have other staff that participate as on the board, and we are in-kind contributors to a number of the programs and efforts that this commission or coalition supports. So we're happy to be here tonight. And across the dais here for me would be our board chair, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Yvonne Tokorius, and I'm the board chair for the Oregon City School District. Just here to support this commission here.
My name is Spencer Road, and I'm a police officer with the Oregon State Police Department. Right now, I serve as a school resource officer for the Oregon State School District, and I'm also on the board of Oregon City Together.
Front and center.
Okay, I'm Pam Wilson, and I coordinate the coalition.
Okay.
I'm Brian Shaw, just a member of the coalition, but also represent the civic organizations, especially like the Optimus Club here, who are really into the youth of this community also.
Okay, who among you would like to lead off the discussion from your perspective? Although we did hear your presentations before, whatever you care to start off with tonight.
Should we start? Okay. So you have a position paper in front of you, and I can kind of go through the highlights. And first, I kind of to add to what Larry just said, the school district is our fiscal agent. They make it possible with their in-kind match for us to have the federal grant that we have. So thank you for that. And we come from the place where we think it's everybody's job to protect our kids. And when we say protect our kids, we mean prevent. I mean, there's lots of ways to protect kids, but preventing drug and alcohol use is a big one. And I think when I've talked to you before, we've talked about how important it is because of the impact on the adolescent brain. I mean, it's truly, youth use is so different from adult use. And we're asking the council, the commission, to kind of connect the benefits, and I say that in parentheses, the benefits of legal marijuana to mitigate the negative impact on our youth. I mean, I think that between medicinal and recreational marijuana, we have a strong social norm that marijuana is not harmful. And again, adults are different than youth. And our kids, because of our outlets, they see advertising, which the research says that leads kids to want to use it, you know. And actually, I use the word recreational here, but really we say kind of non-recreational, because even that word implies that it might be something fun, which we don't want kids to think that. So we want you to kind of connect, the positive impacts of increased tax revenue to the negative impacts on our youth. And we're requesting that 10% of the dispensary taxes go toward prevention. And it doesn't have to come directly to Oregon City Together. It can come to our members. It can go to the Oregon City School District. It can go to the Oregon City Police. So we're not here saying, oh, keep us, going for the next 20 years. That's not what we're saying. And there's lots of evidence-based ways to prevent. And one of them you've heard before, we're really kind of honing in on is the middle schools. Because, our data, we do surveys, the school district does the survey every other year. And our middle schoolers had a huge drop in how perception of harm of marijuana. So that really rang a lot of alarm bells among us. So we really want to focus with these funds on the middle school because it's so imperative to do it sooner rather than later. And I think Spencer's here to talk about the club he's starting and so forth. But we would use these funds, for the first time on the middle schools. And then an idea we had, the coalition pretty much represents all sectors of the community. And if the group wanted to have a task force, every other year to go with the budget. We could add just a few, people to round out our coalition, and then we could go through, here's the results we received in the last 2 years, and here's some ways we think we should go forward. So it'd kind of be a dynamic process in partnership with the city is how we see it.
Okay. Anyone further from your group want to complement that presentation, or do you want to enter into discussion?
I think just a little bit more is that the state already does this. They already make a contribution from their dispensary taxes. The county already does it. So I think it's in our best interest as the city to also provide some kind of prevention monies for these kids, because our emphasis was with the high school, and we're finding out now that we've got to change that now to, just through the data, that we need to go to the middle school. And it's kind of a sad situation, and I think Spencer's going to be able to add more to it about that. But I just wanted to say thanks for kind of letting us bring this together and become a partner in this with us, so that, the first statement of our program here is that we all have a stake in the life of our youth in this community. So I think we'll let Spencer kind of take over from here, so.
Sure. So, I think everyone's familiar with the We Dine Together program that Officer Plummer started at the high school, right? Nope. The beauty of that program, oh, you're not?
Nope.
So when Officer Plummer and I got to the school was about 3 years ago, him and I noticed that there was a lot of kids eating by themselves during lunch. Now in middle school it's a little bit different because they eat by grades, but in high school everyone eats at the same time. And so he started doing some research. Actually, I think his wife found it, but it was a club that I think was started in Florida, but now it's a national program. And it's the thing that's, and it's called We Dine Together. And the thing that's amazing about it and why it works, I think, is because it's student-led. Obviously, Dave got the ball rolling, but it was led by a student named, I'm blanking on her name, Shaylee Cooper,
Okay,
yes, thank
that
you.
was close.
And she's fantastic, but she's the one that communicates with the national person that runs the organization, sets up the games, organizes outings. And again, the reason why that program had so much success is because it was student-led and they decided on how that thing was going to look and the culture that it created. So moving to the middle schools, right? So part of the reason why I'm here is because marijuana use, vaping, and alcohol use is a huge problem that Officer Plummer and I see in the schools. In particular, the vaping and the marijuana use, I think it's only going to get worse based on the data that I'm seeing and the other people that I talk to. But so in the middle schools, I actually was fortunate enough to start the club last year at Gardner Middle School. And I identified a few kids that wanted to help me start it at a workshop that Oregon City Together put together. And when I met with those kids, they were super pumped. And the first meeting was small. The first club meeting that we had was small. And we kind of worked on the mission statement and naming it. We named it Gardner Gatherings. And I let the kids, I had them make signs, but I wasn't really spearheading it, so to speak. I gave the few kids that were passionate about it the kind of just the green light to promote it, and they promoted it at one assembly. And the next meeting we had almost 50 kids, and Pam had to go back to Domino's to get more pizza.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible, right?
Yeah, it was really great.
And again, the reason why I think it works is because you can almost tell, it's like palpable in the room. The kids want to have these hard discussions, and they know what's right and wrong. It's almost like they need permission to like develop their own culture. It's really weird, right? And I don't know what's different from like our generation, well, maybe not ours, but maybe your guys' generation. Ours, right? But they...
Easy there, Sonny.
Yeah, I know, that's right. But they, for some reason, it's almost like they need permission to say like, oh yeah, this is the standard that I expect at my middle school, and we're gonna hold each other accountable. So anyways, that's part of the reason why I'm here, is just to talk about that like anecdotal experience that I've had with the kids so far. And I know they're super pumped about it. I know there's a huge need for it. I've reached out to a health educator with Clackamas County, mental health workers within the school district. I work for Northwest Family Services. And the idea that I kind of have in terms of the middle school program is to have these people come in periodically and just give 10, 15-minute little blurbs on, whether it's the hazards of smoking or, how to talk to a friend that might be feeling depressed or suicidal, all these sorts of things, right? And have it be an opportunity where it's not like a classroom setting where there's teachers and all that stuff, where it's kind of open for them to talk about this stuff amongst themselves and really develop their own culture, right? That's part of our mission statement, is like the Kids' Gardner Gatherings mission statement is to really help change youth culture. And I think a lot of research shows too that, like, if you let kids, obviously we're going to guide them. I'm not just going to give them, the keys to the car, but if you let them decide how to dictate their own culture, it works really well. So I don't know in terms of the numbers and the funding and all that stuff, that's way outside of my purview, right? But I would imagine no matter where the money goes, if it can go to whether paying a salary to someone to help run the club or to pay for food, right? There's all that, time during the summer where a lot of our high-risk kids are unsupervised. I see, me and my coworkers see them on patrol, all summer. I took quite a few of them to jail, unfortunately, this summer. So maybe funding summer programs with the partnership of the school district. So there's a lot of stuff that we could use this money for. But anyways, I'll be quiet. And
Is this an after-school program?
yes, thank you. Yes, I've talked to the school folks and other people, and 2 times a month seems to be the right amount. And it's nice because there's an after-school bus that can take kids home at 5 for the middle school. So transportation really isn't an issue as long as they get signed up ahead of time. It changes nothing for the parents and transportation and all that stuff. So it really works out good.
So speaking of our group, our generation,
All of ours.
yes, all of ours, I'm including myself in the group. Generally, as I recall, does this club have a faculty sponsor?
So
Because most of the clubs I was in school, all the way through school, we always had a faculty, it was always the cool teachers.
of course. So at the middle school, we had Maureen Polero, and she's been involved with Oregon City Together and events like that. And that's the other cool thing about this is, like, I send out an email to people in Gardner, and I get 10 responses. I would love to help with that. I would love to be a part of that. But yes, so Maureen she came to the 2 meetings that we had, and it was really cool because she brought she has this cadre of board games and all this different stuff that she brought. And so that's I'm still kind of working on, and I'm asking for everyone's help, right? Because formulating all this and putting that into action is also not my strong suit, right? But so getting like a school representative that's a part of the club is going to be the plan going forward at Ogden Middle School and at Gardner.
Like I said, I'm assuming you remember that from when we were in school.
Right, yes, exactly. I do remember that, yes.
Let me just take a moment. I do want to applaud the We Dine Together program. And I know Commissioner Smith was deeply involved in that. And anything that helps children at a point where they're seeking their identity or avoids them feeling isolated or accepted or increases communications or avoids those situations that you spoke of, whether they be depression or suicide or some of the other horrifying events that we've seen in schools. How can you not support those? So, my compliments on that. Now, tonight's mission is what do we do about this program tonight? How do we support it, and what form does it take? So is there another member of your group that wants to speak further, or do we want to open it up for discussion among everyone? Okay, not having other input, discussion among ourselves. Commissioner Smith.
So I've been waiting for a long time to have this meeting, and I think it's really crucial, especially prior to the start of the school year. So I will make some comments, I think, on what has already been stated tonight, which I actually, before I started teaching in the school district, was part of several classes where I taught after school programs at Ogden. So definitely between, and the high school has, I think we've lost some, but we had between 20 and 30 clubs at one time. So I definitely see, the benefit of after-school programs, the benefit of clubs, and how that keeps kids involved and maybe, at school longer until parents are home, those kind of things, especially even what you mentioned with the summer. And so I don't want to negate any of the benefits of any of that, because I think it's crucial. I guess what I'm a little concerned about is you kind of mentioned the little bit of the focus being kind of priority towards the high school and then shifting. And I can kind of understand that. I guess my concern, though, is that especially at the high school, there's a climate and there's a culture that will not be changed by focusing on the middle school. And so what that means is if we focus so much attention just on the middle school in this regard, that it's going to take, a few years for that to, go into the new school. I think into the high school. I think that, so I don't want to I think it needs to be a focus on both to some degree, both middle school and high school. And I think it's a perfect opportunity to do that this year with a brand new administration at the high school. And I think I've had a lot of dialogue with the school resource officer and both school resource officers in the last year or so about really, trying to come up with some ideas that have an education component, which definitely having speakers come to these kind of programs after school would do that. And our school resource officers, make decisions on a day-to-day basis with the administration on how to deal with enforcing, drug use or vaping or whatever at the school. And clearly they make a judgment about when it's best to do an education piece versus arresting a student or something like that. And I think that the ability to enhance that piece, and what I mean by that is if there were situations where, there was, the first time a student is caught vaping, or the first time a student is caught with marijuana at school, is there some sort of a diversion program or some sort of after-school class, much like driver's ed or whatever, where those kids, rather than be cited, go to this required class? Right. I mean, something like that, where they're going to get some background and they're going to get some education that hopefully will resolve a lot of the problems. And I think that that's one of the things that I actually thought it would be smart to have our municipal court judge here, because I see similarities of the partnerships that the city and the school district have with attendance court, which I think we should still be focusing even more attention on, that maybe some component of that could be similar. And yet, we don't want to recreate the wheel. So I'm thinking, even countywide, is there other OC togethers in other communities or other, countywide where, depending on what high school a kid's in, that we have some sort of process. And it may take us a couple of years to get there, but, yeah.
I can answer that a little bit.
Okay.
So juveniles go through the difference between, most things that happen because of your age, it's a status offense versus,
Sure.
Alcohol's a good example. So anybody who's under 18 does not go to the municipal court. They go to the juvenile court of the Clackamas County. And usually by the time, one of the things I'll say about the relationship with SROs and the school district, it's a real collaboration. And somebody really has to want to get arrested or to get
Right.
taken to
Oh, for sure.
really the juvenile reception center.
Right. No, I know.
They focus on that piece of decision-making and working with the school folks to, that's kind of a last resort. But once they do go into the juvenile system, there is a very robust, and it's been around for a long time, a diversion program. And so there's a counselor through the juvenile, they'll basically get sentenced to diversion. And so we have, and it happens, I would say several times a week, where we have those kids showing up with a parent at the police department to meet with their juvenile diversion counselor. And a lot of what those diversion people do is they're kind of maybe some muscle that the parent might not have for a variety of reasons. It's a set of guidelines and some accountability, really more than anything else, that the juvenile department is helping the parent have. Now, more serious matters, assaults or things like that, weapons, it's a little bit different, but that is already in place and has been for a long time.
Well, I guess then why is it why isn't it working? I mean, I guess we're not seeing, at least personally as a teacher, I'm not seeing that effect at the school, and I don't know that the kids see it. So what is it that I mean, there's kids vaping in the school every day, in class every day. So without some sort of process within the building or within the district, I'm not sure that those kids see that. Because it's definitely,
I think what you're getting at, and maybe some of what Spencer's getting at, and it's just from when I was a real cop, usually, that's true. By the time kids are that age, and being a parent, really, you're a consultant once they're 15, 16, 17. And I think that there's a lot more, some kids respond to the heavy hand or whatever you want to call it. But I think a lot of this is around, realizing that kids today they're going to make the decision of whether or not, they're not going to do it because they're grounded or for whatever reason. It's creating this culture of them making the decision for themselves. Some pretty good examples of what just nonstop education. I thought DUI education was a waste of time because we were constantly over the years just of being an officer, just arrest after arrest. When are people going to learn about DUIs? My kids do not drink and drive, and my kids are 24. And it's really interesting to see that at some point, education started working to some degree with kids because they all Uber. We didn't Uber when we were that age.
Called a friend.
Well,
Maybe you didn't have any friends, I don't know.
yeah.
Just to
The
say.
culture has changed though some with DUI. I think it takes a long time.
And I think that's the difference in the nature of this program, what you described, Chief. I mean, this is upfront cultural change. Let's try to get ahead of it. Besides, somebody goes into the system, then they experience these corrective actions, I'll hold my comments for last. Commissioner Lyle Smith, care to comment in any way?
Sure. So I don't have to repeat the positive comments. I guess I'll just say that I do think it's really good work. And it sounds like what Commissioner Smith was talking about was kind of more of an internal program versus a program that sends folks external to a external system. And so maybe that is the niche that OC Together can provide of that internal club or that internal community where you're working on that culture, where your peers are agreeing to change the culture, or if, a lot of times when you're that age, it helps to see a peer that will say no or say, I'm not interested, versus the peer pressure to go with the crowd. So I think maybe that may be something of kind of what you were getting out of this internal, and I definitely see there's a role there. So to return to the business of the commission, which is the unfortunate side of our duties up here. I think one of the things that held us back this time when we were reviewing the budget were two items. One was that we in general wanted a policy on how we decide to give out funds to nonprofit organizations. And I'll say that's nonprofits, that could be community groups, it could be, anybody other than a non-government entity where we have the tools in place to kind of easily do that. And I know we have the tools in place to do it, but at the same time, we get requested by a lot of community organizations for money, and 10% here, 10% there, 10% there, even 1% here. When we're trying to balance the budget, we need a policy that helps us decide that criteria of, and we have our enhancement grant program, which, kind of hands out money, and it has all these criteria, and I think that we, or else I'll speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure we talked about it as a group of wanting just to have some guideline that we can not only follow when we're making decisions about where the money is going, but it also gives the community some guidelines as far as, these are the things we're looking for. Here's our limit, and here's how we're deciding where to give money, and here's what the process is. So I'm not sure that we figured that out. I think it's on our to-do list of things to do. So I think as much as we all support it, that may be a hindrance. The other thing I would say is I think several of us are from the private sector, even in the public sector, and we're very deliverables oriented. And so I think for me personally, I would love to support the program, but I would love to see your program ironed out on paper for us to know what exactly is the money going to, if it is the school district, why is it going to the school district? What does that proposal look like? What are the deliverables? If we're giving you $50,000, what is it that's going to happen in the school year that we can say, that you can come back to us and then say, yep, we had all of these meetings and we did this, and Officer Road, went and he set up this group, or whatever it is. I think we're all supportive of the work, but we are still accountable to the public as far as how we spend our dollars, and we're going to be very conscious of that. And so I'd love to have a checklist, and part of that is, and I would love to give you money, but I want to know, I just need more meat on the bones as far as what the program will look like in whatever the time span is that we're giving you money. But it's good work.
So the danger of going last, there'll be some repetition, and what I've got to say, it parallels everyone in some form. First, there's no question that the mission is supported. That goes without saying. Okay, so that matter is settled. The question becomes how to do that, and Rachel, Commissioner Lyle Smith is correct. I'd hope this would be part of a larger conversation about how do we allocate monies to these different groups. That not having happened, let me speak about what I think about tonight. I also, having come from the private sector and also having written grants and a 501c3 qualification for a youth sports team that I organized, there's things that I would like to see. I'm not a fan of just throwing money with an undefined purpose, because it just doesn't work well. But what does work well, and some of this is because of my 501c3 experience and private sector, I like to see structure, as the commissioner has already alluded to. I like to see deliverables, which you've alluded to them, but they can be enumerated. I'd like to understand the methodology. Is that methodology going to be something to attendance court, as Commissioner Smith said? What's the education aspect of it? Will there be diversion or counseling? And I like that part about parental involvement, because they need to be there too. And I want to tell you, I believe what Rocky said is correct. I mean, if we introduce this at one level, we need to reinforce it at the other level. First, we want immediate results, and we need to introduce it at both levels. And second, we don't want people being reconverted to a different lifestyle, about you're the punky 7th or 8th grader who got this, well, now you're in the real world kid, join the big league. I don't want to hear that. I want to support it all the way through. The peer support piece, as the officer said, is huge, as is the parental piece. Student-led organizations are more effective, and peers are more effective than old people. And I'm in that league,
I'll say, I don't know who you're talking about.
I'm just speaking for myself.
Okay,
I don't point in.
good. Glad you're doing that.
The other component I want is something that you see occur every once in a while, and I don't say it would occur, but it gives everybody a sense of comfort. You'll occasionally see an organization that has a financial security mishap where somebody runs off with the funds. And let's put, like in my 501c3, we needed 2 signatures from different households. That's just a basic financial security control. And I'd like to see that. I'd love to see a budget all those things we spoke about, whether we're going to do a tennis court, education, diversion council, what component of our budget are we going to put toward that? And that can be flexible, but that's our kickoff thing. And in the end, I'm not a fan of saying we're going to give you a percentage of money, because who knows how that'll fluctuate. I mean, if you submit a budget and then we say, and to accomplish that, we feel we need X amount of dollars, maybe that's greater than what your percentage, and maybe it's less than, but the idea is to accomplish the mission, and how much support can we provide? So in the end, the other thing is, how do we measure the effectiveness? And, I guess we already have data on arrests made and incidents at the school. We've got a baseline. We put this program into effect, we should hopefully see a decline in those occurrences over a period of years as the program implements itself. So again, I will say this, and I'm not a believer in dollars first, I'm a believer in a structured program that I and the community can support, but make no mistake, I am in support of it.
I was wondering if Superintendent Didway had any, you're kind of got your foot in administering, obviously, the school district, working with OC Together, working with our student resource officers. Kind of what are you seeing, and your thoughts on how could we be a better partner?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I see those as two different questions, so I'll answer one at a time. The first is that we definitely, our youth are a part of our community, and we follow a trend that we see nationwide, and we have a lot of data that says that our youth over time, since the legalization of marijuana in this state and the opening of dispensaries in our community, we have seen a decrease in the perception of harm for the use of marijuana in our youth. And we've done that through a number of surveys that we do on an annual basis. We use more than one tool. And we have comparative data that allows us to look at that compared to other communities. And we know that we, again, are following a trend that we're seeing across the nation. That correlates with an increase of self-reported use. So we know that there's an effect here and there's a connection. And that's what I've seen as an administrator, and I can see that also in evidence in our own discipline records. And I imagine that if you look up the chain, it probably is reflected in some activity legally, both in young youth in our community and young adults. I think tonight, as a member of Oregon City Together and the coalition, we were here not so much to actually propose a specific middle school program or ask for funding for it, but rather to invite the commission to be a participant in this coalition with a shared mission of preventing use and changing the trajectory of those data points that we notice with our youth. I think that what I would say as an outside entity that is intersecting with Oregon City Together is that Oregon City Together has a really good track record of developing very clear objectives in their grant application with a series of programs that are collaboratively developed and implemented with a lot of sweat equity from community members. And they do a great job of measuring outcomes of those to either by levels of participation and or trying to connect that with outcomes. And we're struggling with trying to change that trajectory because rather than seeing a decrease, we're seeing increase. But that has a lot to do with community norms that are set and community decisions that are made. And we want to make sure that we're connecting those. So our invitation was to the commission to not only participate, but also to consider using some of the revenue that we know comes from those dispensaries toward those prevention activities, either independently or with us or with some other agency. If there is an interest in jointly developing something with Oregon City Together, I think that would be a great thing, and that would probably be a work team or a task force that would look at that. And I know from previous experience with Oregon City Together that they are addressing the full spectrum of our community with a focus on youth, not exclusively middle school, but including middle school, with an emphasis at this moment at developing some after-school programs with middle school, because we know that's a need in our community. But that is not in any way to suggest that there isn't need for continued education and support for high school students as well. I would say, and I'm looking over at Spencer because I happen to know he's going to agree with me on this one, we could say the same thing about our elementary students too, which might sound alarming to you. But nonetheless, it is true that we could use help with them too. And I'm going to say beyond high school too, with some of our young adults. We know that some of the same impacts are happening with that full continuum. So again, the invitation, this was more of an invitation of, we know there's a stream of revenue that's related to dispensaries. We want to call attention to the fact that we think that it would be appropriate and right to see that partially funding some prevention efforts of some kind, and we would invite you to make your own decisions about that as a commission and your own city programs, and or consider partnering with this entity, Oregon City Together, or some other with those same aims.
So are there those among the group currently that could put those thoughts to paper with associated costs and methodologies to combat it, that would give this commission and this city comfort in saying that's a viable operational budget, a mission statement, we can support that with confidence? Can that be done?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm looking at the executive director for Oregon City Together. I shouldn't speak for her, but I will speak as the fiscal agent, because you mentioned the fiscal part of that, and the school district is the fiscal agent. As a public entity, we require all of the safeguards that we require for other public funds and the use of public funds. Sometimes, I'm sure, to the great disgruntlement of our dear partners, because it can be a little cumbersome. But we consider that our duty as custodians for funds.
I think that kind of document would give this commission great comfort and state clearly what it is we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and what the costs associated with it. The things you related, I'm not going to revisit. I mean, measurables. You know, we have the baseline. Let's see what we can do to put this together.
Yeah, we can do that, because when we apply for grants, you know, it's very.
It's essentially what it is.
Yes, we have to say what we're doing, why we're doing it.
Right.
And everything we do, because of our federal funding, is also evidence-based. So that's a really strong priority that, you know, why are you doing this? And there's certain practices that have been proven to work better than others.
Right. And it might even clarify the project in your mind. You might say, my God, I thought it was going to cost this. It's actually going to cost this.
Sure.
So that would be good for all involved.
Yeah.
Commissioner Smith.
So I guess what I'm just wanting to make sure happens is that there's a direct connection between the funds and exactly what we're targeting. Because all these, I mean, like I said, I've been part of after-school programs at the middle schools. They in themselves have an importance, but those aren't necessarily focused on this mission. No matter how much money you spend on pizza isn't going to solve the problem. So I really wanted to find some sort of dialogue, and tonight's, and I was one that really asked for this meeting a lot, mainly because I thought this would be a time to have a discussion and really brainstorm ideas, which we really haven't been doing. Because I really feel like there needs to be a way better partnership between the city, OC Together, the school resource officers, and how we really tackle it, so that we do see a difference. Because I, you know, being at the high school last year, major problem. And I think really there's maybe 2 of us in this room, maybe 3 of us in this room, that a year from now will be able to tell you if anything with this money actually benefited kids, because we see it every day.
Right.
And that's what I want to be able to see at the end of the year. I want to be able to see that, you know, and I'm not talking that it's a crackdown. I'm talking that it's really an education piece that really gets through to students some way. And, you know, I'm more than willing to help in any way that I can with that dialogue, but I just, want to see a direct connection to that. And I think it's a valid point to say that I'm not even concerned about what percentages it is, because if it was the right thing, I could see that changing, you know, and I think there's support up here for us to even to talk about, you know, the percentage of school resource officers or the addition of school resource officers or any of that stuff. That's all stuff that I think we're all open to. But we want to see a really, you know, we want to see more than just an after-school club that people have pizza and maybe have a speaker here and there once in a while. That, to me, I don't think is going to be enough to really focus on it. I guess that's my concern. And how we really make sure that that is, you know, something we can track, something that we, you know, there's an option for when a kid gets caught with something to say, hey, you know, this is now what happens. And and I think some of that can be so simply done within the school environment that, you know, that students see it, know that that's a system that's in place and an expectation is in place. And I really believe a year from now, it's not going to be as much of a problem if we really do that. And having, you know, such a change at the beginning of the school year with new administrators and new focus, I mean, right now is the time to do it. So I hope we can all,
We can.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So maybe we wait now and have more of a written proposal come back to us, or?
I would like to, I think that's what this commission is asking for, and I think the capability to generate that has been expressed, so I think we have direction. Does anyone have any closing or summation comments they'd like to make?
I'd like to just say thank you. I'm a parent. I have of teenagers. I have 3 teenagers and an exchange student coming and going. So I can't tell you how vital this is. And we can change our culture. If we look at the decrease in tobacco use, because of years and years and years of marketing about how bad it is, we can do the same thing here in this city. I think it takes everyone in this room to be part of that, but we can do it.
Pervasive.
And having your support and your guidance and partnership is going to be huge. I really do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank everybody for
Yeah,
coming.
absolutely.
So you forgot the peanut gallery here on this end.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That being who?
Me.
Your time, it's too late.
It's never too late.
3-minute timer, please.
Yes. I just wanted to say in summation that I concur with everything that Rachel said. Those are my concerns, and I appreciate the fact that you came in to do the presentation, but my concerns are broader than just this particular organization. And I also would like to say that in his absence, because he's not here, is that I would want to fully understand what the budget implications are and why it's going to be the person that's going to be able to help us with and his staff with that. And to me, that is really key. Nobody said no, but nobody said yes. So we have a bigger platform that we need to talk about before we can even get down to talking about this particular group or that particular group. Because one of my concerns, and I've seen this happen before, is that you talk about one organization and then the word gets out and everybody will be in here making it. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but there's only so much money to go around. Money has been allocated to things already. And, how do you decide that, this is more important than that thing or this thing and that? Again, that's the tough decision we have to make. But I guess one of the things is that, again, speaking for all of us in the generations, I remember such a thing as summer school. Do they still have that?
Yeah.
We had to go to, we weren't goofing around during the summer, I assure you. My parents made us go to summer school. And we did fun stuff, but, there's sometimes we had to do the hard stuff. But that occupied a lot of our summer when we weren't running amok on the military base. But again, sometimes things stay the same and sometimes things are different. So that's all I have to say.
Well done, Commissioner. Thank you. With those final comments, I think we're free to move on to the next agenda item, unless someone has
Thank
any
you for
final.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Well done. Well done by everybody.
It's fine. Thanks. I know who you are, but
Thank you for coming up tonight.
You can see my other water bill dropped down my bag because
okay.
I'm just standing
It must be okay.
making sure that
Thank you.
something didn't fall out of my bag when I was flipping around all my papers back here.
Oh, no.
It's me again.
I saw your show last night. Come on.
It's a different show.
Thank you.
It's a different
Rocky even bought a
PowerPoint.
ticket. He came in person.
It's kind of the same show.
No,
It's the same show.
the same
Yeah,
show?
same as, only different.
It's not.
I didn't get a ticket for that show.
I made a whole different PowerPoint.
now's a good time when you're not.
So just remember, folks out there, as you're going out the door, we can hear you guys, so.
Okay.
So then, I hear, you must be involved in this because I hear this coming down.
That's right,
tonight.
of course. I hate to disappoint, man. Actually,
Isn't John the king of the PowerPoints?
Oh, but
I keep getting that reputation, I'll take it, but by the way, Christina does some pretty amazing PowerPoints too, and you're gonna see that
Don't try to
tonight.
share the blame. Item 3B is PC 19081, is the Beaver Creek Road Preferred Street cross-section, and its sponsor is none other than Director John Lewis.
Yeah, so I pulled the short straw. Laura went on vacation and she asked me to kind of help introduce this item, but really others are going to present. I just wanted to say a couple things. This title on this is Beaver Creek Road. I noticed that's a little different in your report.
Why
but
does it say preferred?
But the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan, zoning and code amendments are really where this inspired from. That's the project that planning has been leading. And out of that came this desire to talk a little bit more about the roadways itself, right? And what that future roadway would look like. And I would consider this, after having looked at some of the information in the last couple of days, it's pretty high level. It answers some questions, but there's a lot of unanswered questions in this. So this is an early kind of sharing of information with you. I would say that not only all the answers are here or are in the information that's been provided to you, but I think it does help us get to a conversation that we need to have with you folks about, if you're leaning a little bit more towards a 3-lane road section with signals versus roundabouts, then that's going to be a little easier to kind of align with what the public involvement has been in the past from 2008, right? If you're leaning to something different than that, maybe a larger facility, that's okay too. We just feel like we want to make sure that we're hearing that, because that would require us to go back out to the public and engage the key stakeholders in that conversation, so that they, those that were heavily involved in 2008 aren't kind of feeling left by the wayside. So, all know Christina Robertson Gardner. She's presenting. I'd also introduce Carl Springer, who's with DKS and Associates. DKS and Associates has done all of our transportation system plan work in the past, so they are the author of that document and the update that we did not too long ago to the TSP. And then Dana, over my shoulder, Dana Webb, who's our city engineer, she's been working with Christina a fair amount. And then John Repplinger, who's also a different traffic consultant, but does most of our development review kind of consulting. So we brought a slew of folks in here. Whether you need to talk to them or not, that's kind of up to you, but we wanted to make sure we had the right folks at the table. So with that, Christina.
Thank you. All right. A teenager recently won the PowerPoint competition, and I'm not even close to that. So as always, I try to put a lot of information. You don't have to read all of it, but I want to be able to make sure as we have this conversation, I'm able to kind of provide these data inputs that'll help us as we try to figure out what the next steps are. So why are we here tonight? John did provide some of that background. 2006, that public engagement process started. There's a citizen advisory committee for the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan. It was adopted in 2008, and it was readopted in 2016. The project I have been working on since January is the zoning and code amendments that take the adopted concept plan, apply zoning to the properties that are inside the city limits, provide comprehensive plan designations out to the urban growth boundary, and provide needed code amendments to implement the plan to allow development applications to move forward. Currently, if you're in the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan area and you are in the city limits and you are in the new urban growth boundary expansion area, you do not have a city zone. So there's some areas that are still holding county zones waiting for this process. So as we move through the public meetings this spring, I did hear a fair amount from the public who attended that there was some unease about the adopted 3-lane segment, and if that's still something that the concept plan should move forward with. So kind of the question is that if 11 years after it's first adopted, is this still the preferred road alignment? The key thing I wanted to let the commission know is moving forward, we are just starting the legislative process for the code amendments. The planning commission had their first hearing last night. As you know, the legislative process is not like the quasi judicial. It'll take the time it takes for both bodies to move forward to recommend, the approved code amendments through an ordinance process. There will be various amounts of planning commission meetings, and at some point, the planning commission will provide a recommendation to the city commission, and you will hold hearings for legislative file 1903, which is the zoning and code amendments. As part of that, the preferred cross-section of whatever is determined should be part of that package. Right now, we have a Beaver Creek Road concept plan, 3-road section with no dimensional standards. It just kind of shows a 90-foot cross-section. So if a development application came in soon after the code amendments, we just really wouldn't have the guidance we need to enact conditions of approval and get those development to build to what we really want and whatever the adopted plan is. So our recommendation as staff is that the preferred alignment or the preferred configuration should be at some point brought into the legislative file that we're doing and then be part of the ordinance adopting it. So we have a little bit of time, and some of the questions that John will bring up from next steps is kind of like, how does these questions happen while we're moving forward with the legislative code amendments?
So before you go any further, are you going to tell us what the concerns you heard about the existing
I
design?
think there's questions about capacity, traffic, AM, PM peak traffic, people who ride that section of Beaver Creek Road and existing transportation problems they are experiencing. So I think it was a general unease. Carl can talk about some specific existing conditions today, but I think through the process we heard just a general questioning of if that 3-lane segment was still the right alignment for Beaver Creek. Not necessarily this right here is the problem, but I heard a general unease through the spring and the 2 meetings and as well as the public comments.
Since nothing exists in a vacuum, I think it's important to give due consideration to the effect if we're successful in the Beaver Creek project in general. We're going to have manufacturing and such there. They're going to want adequate transportation too. So I hope that was expressed at some point, but please proceed.
It was very much so. So we asked, as part of the code amendments, we need to do 2 things. We need to look at the jobs and housing numbers that were identified as part of the zones and make sure that we could rezone the property. So Oregon City, we have the zone change criteria, the transportation planning rule, adequacy of facilities. We had to make those findings. So we hired DKS through our consultant team to do that. But we also asked 3 additional questions that we thought reflected some of the comments we heard this spring. One was, what is the right intersection control option, roundabouts or signals? Right now, there's a signal identified for Myers Road at Beaver Creek, but Loder Road and Glen Oak Road, the TSP has roundabouts. So we wanted to ask, what are the benefits of the 2 different control options and what would be the preferred option moving forward? There was a question about the Holly Lane connection. There is a parallel street to Beaver Creek Road in the concept plan area that would, at this point, dead end to the urban growth boundary to the north, and at some such time later would be added to and extended to Thayer Road and Maple Lane and farther up. So there was a question, A, how important was this to our transportation model? As if it's not built for the next 40, 50 years, does it kind of break the model? And what happens if we just remove it completely? What benefit or detraction does it do to the transportation analysis? And the third question was that what is the optimal cross-section for Beaver Creek Road? So those are the 3 questions that we tasked DKS to perform. And so I'll talk a little bit about the background of what we have today, and then I'll hand it over to Carl. Oops. So as an overview, these are staff's recommendations coming out of what we heard. First, intersection control. We recommend to replace the roundabouts at Loder Road and Glen Oak Road with signals in the transportation system plan. There are many benefits of signals versus roundabouts, but I have my current planner land use hat on, and it's going to be very hard to build a full roundabout as part of any individual land use application, conditions of approval, because you can't build a half a roundabout. It doesn't really work. So you would need to acquire any additional land you need, build a full roundabout, and that's a lot easier if you have a capital improvement program or you have a local improvement district, but a one-off land use application coming in is a lot harder. So knowing that we are going to be building Beaver Creek slowly over time through development applications, providing a signalized approach just seems a very practical option. So on a staff level, we are recommending replacing signals at Loader Road and Glen Oak Road as development comes in. The Holly Lane connection, we found out through the analysis that the extra trips that could be brought through on that Holly Lane connection if it connected was marginal. So to answer the question, it did not break the model. And best practices is to make sure we have some dead-end roads at the urban growth boundary, because we don't want to be in a place where we've been before in other places in the city where we had no road connections at the urban growth boundary, and then when there was future expansion, there was no way to connect to existing development. So to us, we recommend existing condition best practices, allow those roads to dead end at the urban growth boundary to the north, and wait for the if and when there's ever a connection. And then the roadway connection is the interesting piece of the puzzle. The 3-lane segment was found to meet the requirements for zone change and our transportation planning rule. So as adopted, it does meet it. So we have a little bit of a question. What is adopted? We could move forward with what was adopted in the plan, meet the requirements for the zone change, and move forward and change the zonings for the property. But is that what this community wants? Is that the kind of direction of the city commission? So we don't really have a staff recommendation, so we're kind of pushing it back on to the city commission to have these larger conversations about how we want to have the conversation with the public about that.
I believe the adjective chosen about 3 lanes was adequate. Adequate.
Right, so it meets the legal requirement, absolutely. So if I was tasked as staff to implement the concept plan, we have the ability to implement the concept plan because what was been adopted can implement and change the zone. So that's kind of a technical answer, not necessarily a policy answer. So a little evaluation of the road network. What is adopted today, is 1 lane in each direction, a very large stormwater planner in the middle. So instead of doing the stormwater planners on the outside, looks at a kind of a V, inverted V approach, bike lanes, sidewalk planter strips, and then what's proposed is roundabouts. Just want to remind everybody, when you have a center island that is built in between the left turn signals, you have really a parkway model, you have really controlled access. So some of our constraints that are happening on Malala Avenue, we have the ability in Beaver Creek, when development come in, to not allow left turns off of driveways on Beaver Creek Road through development. We were really going to be forcing development to be using those signalized intersections, and so you won't be having people trying to turn left out of driveways of new commercial developments. We'll have a lot of restriction on access to that road outside of the intersections. So this is a photo from the adopted concept plan. You'll notice it has a 90-foot right-of-way dimension, but not dimensions for any individual subsection like the travel lane or the landscape medium. Because once again, this was a concept plan. And so we're now in a place where we want to refine a bigger picture. The landscape medium is proposed to change, but then to be reduced as you get to the turn lane. But you'll notice on the bottom kind of left side, it doesn't have the landscape medium completely go away. This is a much wider landscape medium to fit the 90-foot. Other places in Oregon City, we may have a landscape medium, but it stops once you get to the turn lane. In this situation, the landscape medium is larger enough that you'd still have a little bit of a landscape medium even with a turn lane.
I'm fairly certain that the report I read in preparation for this meeting did have individual dimensions on lanes and landscape.
Right, and that's what we're proposing as staff.
Okay.
But we took what this model was and said, well,
Okay.
what's the existing city dimensions and what do we use today and how would we translate that? So what you see in the staff memo is our first guess translation. So it's a starting point for conversation. So the transportation planning rule, once again, the key finding, I think, the reason why we came back to you is that the requirements from Chapter 1768 zone change and transportation planning rule, no additional revisions to the street cross-section are needed. And so we could come into a land use hearing today and, you can ask Carrie, do we meet the requirements? And she said, based on what was submitted, you meet the requirements and could move forward with a zone change based on transportation analysis. So here's a slide of existing 5-lane sections in Oregon City. This is kind of right at Beaver Creek Road, kind of near First Street, and then kind of closer to 213. And this is more typical of what a 5-lane cross section would look like with today's city standards. So when we're talking about a 5-lane cross section, it's not exactly this, but here's an approximation of what that would look like. So I'm going to pass it over to Carl. He's going to give a little debrief of how they looked at those 3 questions, as well as the analysis of are there adequate projects in our transportation system plan and adopted concept plan to meet the expected growth of both jobs and housing units. And then we'll finish off with some questions from John Lewis on kind of next steps. And it's more of a process questions and not, you don't have to tell us what you think specifically the answer should be for the road alignment. What's the next process we should go through?
Oh, I want to tell you what I think. I do want to tell you what I feel.
I know, I was gonna say, oh, we have it already.
Yeah.
You're going to hear it,
We don't have to.
whether you want to or not, you're going to
We
hear it.
want to. We want to tell you.
We've got it figured out.
Nobody's stuttering up here. You're gonna hear it.
Okay,
This group has no opinions.
it's good to be back. Welcome, commissioners. So I'm Carl Springer, DKS Associates. I'm a principal in the Portland office. I was the leader of the TSP update in 2013, so I'm pretty familiar with the city. Pretty familiar with how TSP policies apply to development review, that kind of a thing. And I know what the TPR thing is that Christina keeps alluding to. So let's go through this. So what's the issue today is that Beaver Creek Road is designated as a major arterial, 1 lane in each direction. Where it intersects with 213 is pretty heavily congested. There's a lot of work planned to be done to expand that intersection. The problem on that side of town is there's not very many parallel routes, right? So what does want to get to 213? A lot of traffic has to use Beaver Creek Road to get there. The other thing is further south as you go along, there's hardly any traffic signals. So as traffic has grown over the year, it gets harder and harder to turn on and off Beaver Creek, and that'll continue as growth occurs. So that's the nature of the road today.
You're being way too kind about this. This road sucks and the traffic is too fast. Let me just be explicit about it.
Okay, it sucks and it's too fast. And it'll get, well, never mind. We'll hold on to the too fast comment. So upcoming projects, a couple things are under construction, the Myers Road extension. The second one, the intersection improvements at Myers Road and 213, so both ends of Myers Road are being looked at. 213 and Beaver Creek, the free flow acceleration lane, that's on the list but not currently funded. So I think you're familiar, commissioners, you're probably familiar with what that is, right? Because that demand going from Beaver Creek to northbound 213 it's a lot of cars want to do that in the morning, and if you make an improvement to get that away from the traffic signal, everything will flow better. Lots of local circulation options in this part of the area are planned but not yet built. So traffic forecasting, commissioners, so if you know how we do these TSPs and the forecastings that go along with it, before we get to the place where we feel comfortable recommending a particular cross-section of a road, we look at growth not only from the Beaver Creek concept plan, not only through all of Oregon City, but frankly, from Forest Grove to Gresham, from Molalla all the way up to Vancouver. We look at the entire Portland metro region in terms of what growth could be expected in the next 20 to 25 years. And those are the forecasts that we use to develop any kind of a transportation system. So the choices that we make as transportation planners is let's pick a facility that's suitable for the neighborhood we're dealing with. And let's think about what policies this facility meets. So one policy that we've talked about a lot and I think is on your minds is mobility, getting cars through an intersection or along a road. But there's other policies to consider in making those choices about those things. I won't dwell too long because you guys look like you're ready to talk. Future conditions. So as traffic grows, we did a forecast with or without the Beaver Creek plan. We did a
forecast with and without the Holly Street extension. And came up with some findings that the 3-lane section can work and still meet performance standards. So that means all the growth that the city is expecting over the next 20 years, plus the Beaver Creek extension, can be served with a modern urban 3-lane section on Beaver Creek Road. Not the street that's out there today, but a modern urban 3-lane section with upgraded traffic signal controls at a few locations that really would work terribly if you didn't do some kind of upgrade. The TSP identified roundabouts. We've also talked about, Christina's talked a little bit about the drawbacks of actually having to build roundabouts incrementally. That's the challenge. How do you do that in parts? Right? Usually it's a whole project drops in at one time. So if they don't have an effective way to make that happen or an effective way to fund it, you've got a bit of a problem.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
If the 5-lane option were chosen, why
Yes.
was Loader Road chosen as a termination of that option?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And that's in the report.
I had the same question.
That seemed appropriate time to ask you.
Okay.
Part of me thinks it's because Loader Road's going to be a focal point for the commercial development in the concept plan area.
Southern
And
edge.
we're likely to see a cross street there.
Glen Oak.
As we're likely to see the cross street from High School Lane, which has also got, so from both sides of both the Beaver Creek concept area and from the other side of the road, the west side of the road, there's a lot of development potential under there, even though there's a lot of power lines and other little obstacles on that side of the street. I think that's part of it. I also think part of it's got to do with the fact that the high school built what the high school built there. So I think in order to do the larger section there, we're going to have to do something much larger.
No comment.
Well, lots of comments.
Okay,
You know.
well, we'll hold them for now. And the other thing is, when you deal with commercial traffic, how do they get through roundabouts with large trucks?
You do.
Is that going to work well?
It can happen.
Okay,
You want to hold that question?
sure, let's hold it.
Okay, just checking.
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Smith.
No.
All right.
He's the roundabout expert.
He's got more
Very good.
questions.
So we have a slide on the 5-lane, and the next slide after that is on the 3-lane. So forecasted volume. So one of the things we did in prepping for this discussion with y'all is look at the volumes on Beaver Creek Road today and in the future, and compared those to the volumes on Malala today and in the future. And what would you think? Would you think one would be similar, different, one's higher or lower? What would you think as longtime residents of the beautiful city of Oregon City? Which has more traffic, Beaver Creek or Malala? What do you think?
Which ones do we think?
Well, I think when I care about my current state, I care about future state.
I think it's,
Right,
I
okay.
think it's a toss-up.
They're very similar. Both carry about the same today, and both in the future will carry about the same.
I personally
But
avoid
certain
Beaver
times
Creek
of the day,
Road.
it's completely different.
Well, Malala is a different case because there's so many businesses on Malala. So I think the midday on Malala is kind of a different beast than what we're probably expecting on Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek's more of a traditional, kind of a suburban feeder commute route kind of a deal. So you'll see heavy loads in the morning, heavy loads in the afternoon, and much lighter in the midday, much lighter at night. Yeah, okay. So in terms of 5-lane sections, I mean, the nice part about 5-lane sections is they give you more capacity, less delay during the peak hour. Probably give you a longer capacity life of that facility, so you can grow even beyond the 2035 or even beyond what's our practice in terms of forecasting traffic. We don't do 50-year design lives like we are living in Germany. Because there's so many unknowns, especially in my business now. Once you get out the 10 to 15 to 20-year range, it's a different world than it was 20 years ago because of the technology changes. We're trying to guess what connected and autonomous vehicles are going to do to the world in terms of how people get around. We don't know that yet, and so we're a little bit cautious at this point.
Didn't we just hear we're all going to be in Ubers, you know?
To be honest, Uber loses so much. I've never seen a business lose so much money as Uber, but
People are investing in it like crazy.
I can't explain that.
I can't either.
But this isn't a financial discussion. So the downside of the 5-lane section is you do have higher speeds, and that by itself does a couple things. One is it makes the severity of crashes much greater. And especially if you're not in it's not two cars. If it's a car and a bike, what became a serious crash becomes a fatality, frankly. So that's the downside of having a higher speed 5-lane section. Instead of a 25 to 30 mile an hour design speed, you're going to be at a 40 to 45 mile an hour design speed. And people will drive 50 and 55 on it. And so it's a whole different class of concerns from a safety point of view, I think, is the main difference. The 3-lane section, it'll be busy. Our numbers showed that you'll meet your targets of how much congestion you'll tolerate during the peak hour, right? And so one thing I can say is that I've been doing this a long time, and I've done a lot of TSPs, and I think as a policy board, it'd be good to think about beyond the peak hour. The thing I say is that I used to be a 4-hour planner. I worry about the 2 hours in the morning and the 2 hours in the afternoon, but now I'm a 24-hour planner. What will this road look like at 8 o'clock at night? What will this road look like at 1 o'clock in the morning? If it's 5 lanes and they're driving 55 on it, it's a whole different character of street when the volumes are really low compared to the peak hour. So there's a trade-off to be considered there. There's other goals to be met as a community with a road choice like this. So I don't know where you're going in terms of facing uses, land uses on there, but any kind of facility or land uses that are facing this facility and you've got 50 mile an hour speeds on it, it brings with it a certain character to it, right? I think you probably know streets like that.
Can I ask you real quick, why are you assuming that it would be 45 and people drive 55? We have pieces of Beaver Creek right now that's a 5-lane segment around First Street that's 35 mile an hour through there. So why couldn't we make this section 35 mile an hour as
You
well?
have choices ahead of you to design it to constrain the speeds. I'm just saying when there's a wider paved width, vehicles intuitively drive faster.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
No, Rachel, I agree with you. I think that that we should be designing roads at lower speeds because we know they're going to exceed them, and that way we might come out even. I just don't support, us designing it at 35 and then watching people fly through there. It's not safe.
I would agree.
I think we need to think, need to think down in terms of how and why we're designing roads to whatever speed.
Right. So I'm sure John or others can talk to that, but that has to do with lane widths, the expanse of the paved right of way, how big are curves you're going to design for, and what the grades are going to be. All those factors play into the speed. So it's not just what a truck can take it at, but what does the driver perceive as a safe speed? I mean, that's kind of the way speed zoning gets set, right? Us engineers go out there and we say, if you're a rational, safe driver, what's a reasonable speed for you? And frankly, that's the mechanics behind speed zoning. So if it's a narrow, tight street, a reasonable driver will react differently than a wide street.
Exactly.
So in summation, a 5-lane road can be designed to lower the speed limit.
It can be designed to a lower speed, yes. If that's your question, yes. But it wouldn't be 5 lanes of asphalt from one curb to another curb with paint in between.
Right.
That would not encourage any kind of speed control by itself. In Carl's opinion. I'm sure others have opinions on it. All right, let's see, Holly Lane, we talked a little bit about this. As a practice, it's good to have connections like that. I work in lots of communities around the metro area that face the same kind of obstacles of some future UGB addition, and there's no street connectivity pointing in that direction. And so they have to provide a complete different set of connections to make that happen. We did look at the forecasting for that, and the volumes on Holly Lane were relatively small compared to everything else. It's carrying about 10% of the north-south traffic through there, and everything else is carrying the balance. So if it's not connected, it's not going to kill the system, like Christina mentioned, but having additional connectivity for whatever reason is a great idea from a planning point of view.
Carl, have you driven Holly Lane?
It's a rickety little street, isn't it?
and
Yes, it
that's-
is.
Yes, it's.
And it'll continue to be a rickety little
it's-
street.
It's not going to change in the near term because the county has no intention of doing anything with it. And
Right.
it's just, You know, unless we can somehow magically wave our wands and change the geology of the land there,
Yeah,
it's just not gonna happen.
fair enough. Well, that underscores my point that it's a minor connector,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Was there any time horizon in your analysis where Holly Lane, where that connection was warranted? Did you go out far enough?
It's
past
not a
2020?
question of warranting, because the volume isn't high enough that it's not really a regional wet route where it's gonna offload traffic from some other parallel route that's congested. It's a low volume, low speed route, and it probably always will be. But it's a matter of circulation options, right? So somebody can use Holly Lane that lives along Holly Lane and get where they need to get without trying to work their way over some other way.
I know
So
there's
it's
nobody,
not for congestion relief, I guess, to put it shortly.
I know there's nobody here alive that we can channel into. Maybe you can channel them for us as to why that junior high school is located up there. I'd say that is one of the mysteries of this community. It's like, why would you have ever located a junior high school up there? It should never be there, and it should go away and be someplace else, because the buses on that road are just, they're killing it. I mean, every
Right.
time I go up there just to observe, it's a frightening situation, passing a school bus on Holly Lane, or a school bus passing you.
I bet.
I think that the thing that I think about though is with our Park Place concept plan and the folks that are gonna be living there, and with the Beaver Creek concept plan, with the employment that we have there, it would be, and I'll just add the Holcomb Road, contingent, not liking that, intersection down at Redland Road. Having a Holly Lane connection, to me, makes a lot of sense, even though it's a county roadway, just like Redland roadway. It's got, the county has plans for wider shoulders on that roadway. So I think just having that so that folks don't have to bump out onto Highway 213 to get to employment in the Beaver Creek concept area is an option that I think not planning for is contrary to really where transportation planning should be, right? You're trying to build that network of connections. So that's what I think you're hearing right now from Carl.
That's not what I'm hearing.
Really?
No, I'm not hearing that.
I like what he said, though.
I'm sorry, but I have to respectfully disagree. I don't agree with that.
With that opinion about more connections are good?
No, about using Holly Lane
Oh, I
to
see.
provide that connection.
Fair enough.
I don't think it,
Fair
as
enough.
you said, it's minor impact, and, I'll give my reasoning later, but yeah, it's not, I
All
don't
right.
think it's supported.
The quality of the road, I get it, okay. In terms of the intersection control, we've touched on that a bit. The one thing I would say, number one, you can design a roundabout to serve whatever vehicle you like. There's plenty of roundabouts in the state already that are being used well by all kinds of vehicles. It's a question of design. There are some benefits of roundabouts from a safety point of view. The speed through the intersection forces all cars to slow down some. So you can't have the high-speed T-bone intersections with roundabouts. It is not physically possible to happen. The life cycle costs of roundabouts tend to be better than traffic signals because you don't have to power them. You don't have to maintain them. You don't have to change the signal timing every few years. But equally beneficial in terms of doing what they're supposed to do. I believe this is a slide for others. Maybe John, perhaps?
Right, so it looks like it changes just a little bit since the last time I looked at it, but, so first of all, Beaver Creek Road and the section of road that we're talking about is county roadway, right? So we are meeting with the county actively to try and figure out how to deal with that little challenge. We see it in other roadways where development happens. The county's wanting a particular standard. They're not always driven as much as we might be in terms of adopted plans. So we got to work out some differences there, probably have an IGA in figuring out how to deal with that. Cost contributing, I think the vehicle registration fee and, maybe some of the projects, some of the funding that they're allocating for jurisdictional transfers might come into play. And to me, Beaver Creek Road is a good candidate for that. Our current SDCs, well, we have some funding for Beaver Creek Road. I think it's much more along the lines of a urban design, a 3-lane road section, maybe not up to what we're talking about, especially on the larger scale. So if we're gonna go with a project like that, which by the way, I don't think is a wrong decision, is gonna cost more, right? So we're probably gonna wanna change our capital program list to make sure we're collecting sufficient SDCs to be able to fund that project. The constructability piece, I think this kind of talks to a little bit of the roundabout piece for me, but also the larger the facility, the more difficult that is to build unless it's a city-driven project. Development community trying to build little pieces of that, maybe big pieces of that, depending on the development, is just a challenge. So, I suspect what we'll do is we'll see development, we'll collect fee in lieu until we can amass enough funding to be able to kind of do a large enough chunk of that to where it makes sense. Maintenance, medians can be done nicely in a way that provides a parkway kind of a concept. I keep thinking of that topic when, looking for direction from you. Part of me wants to know, do we want this to look like a Malala or a Beaver Creek? Or think of other things like Cruise Way or some of those other places where, maybe the pedestrians further out might require more right-of-way, which is another cost implication. But I don't have a sense other than what we've seen in the concept plan, which I struggle with because it's a completely different design. It's not a shed section. It drains to the center. We've got utilities out there right now. I'm not sure how we would even build that kind of and definitely couldn't do it in a time frame that was done over time. We'd have to, gut the whole roadway and do something different there, and maybe even deal with some of the utilities. So I don't think that's what we want to do. But anyway, maintenance is always a concern for me. But if the community wants something more like a parkway, something special about that area, then we need to hear that, and differently, obviously, than what was in the concept plan. So anyway, that's those other factors. I think was there one more slide, Christina?
I actually agree with you, John. I mean, the question is, do you want a parkway, or do you want the most efficient movement of traffic, or do you want cosmetics?
And from my perspective, I remember when I first moved to Portland, moved out near Tannisbourne, 185th. I was just blown away by that boulevard. There was nobody on it at the time, so thinking of facilities like that, I kind of question, the other part that I struggle with a little bit is a lot of this traffic that we're talking about is generated outside the city, and I don't see the county at the table, or I don't see the county coming to the table, just like Holly Lane, to help fund this particular project. So that makes it difficult as well. So
Maybe we get them to come to the table.
that'd be great. I think that takes policy folks to help do that, right? Our policy
I might
folks
know
talking
somebody.
with their policy folks.
I might know somebody.
Good.
We'll
That's
check
good.
on that.
Problem solved.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So Christina, this one here, you're basically saying that the public outreach, in order to get the code amendments, is in process right now. You'd like to move that forward, but you can't do that without a certainty on what we want this roadway to look like. Do we want it to look like, a 3-lane section with narrow medians, or do you want something more like a parkway that looks a little different than that? So having that, if we look at the 5-lane section, then I think we really need to take that back out to our stakeholders and our community and open that conversation up again. Well, we've talked about the 3-lane section and the 5-lane section. Obviously, the wider we get, the more stormwater we treat, the more we got to deal with, drainage across the roadway. But it still can be done. We need to make sure we understand what that is, and we program financially in our financial models for that kind of thing. I guess this is an expectation, waiting for legislative packages to move forward with the city commission by the fall. That's our goal.
Sure.
It's good to have good goals. Yeah, and we're assuming you want more work session on this, but let us know if you don't.
So just one clarification. I mean, one option is the planning commission still works forward, continues all the other work that needs to be done to continue to look at the code and hold the hearings and continue that process. And there could be additional outreach. I think with a goal that by the time it gets to the city commission, there's a little more certainty. So one option, depends on kind of direction from you, is trying to figure out based on what you want, as a professional planning staff, I really do advocate going back to the public if something other than or close enough to what's adopted is what wants to be pursued by the city commission. And how do we do that kind of concurrently with this legislative process? I think we can, because there's no time limit for the legislative process, so we can still continue to hold our meetings and reach out to the public at the same time. You don't have to stop, reach out, and then start again.
Any additional presenters?
No, they're just solid support in the back room, keeping, if you ask the tough questions, we might bring them up.
Well, then I believe it's time for discussion and comment. I'll open it up to commission. Anybody want to lead off?
Are you biting at the bullet?
Not really.
You said you had a lot to say about it.
No, I mean, I guess, I'm still a little bit confused on a couple things because I think I wrote a note or so that the recommendation was roundabouts and then it doesn't seem like it was. So I'm unclear on what really, which way we're leaning on that.
Well, I think I think through this work, we're saying no on roundabouts and suggesting signalization.
Right, okay. There was like there's a clear maps in this presentation, but in our packet, there was like one teeny map in the DKS like packet, but, so I feel like, I'm lacking visuals in terms of the whole,
We can go back.
layout. So if we could go back to
Yeah.
one of those.
Which one do you want to do?
Maybe the other one. Back farther. That's better, I think.
Okay.
So back to that question about Loader Road. Yeah, there was some mention if there was a five-lane section that would end at Loader Road. Now you were, John, you were saying, High School Lane right now is the road that comes from Myers behind the school property, correct? Mm-hmm. And there's a thought that would then loop around where that dotted line is.
There was one more slide that
Yeah,
showed that
yeah,
connection.
there was a better
better slide.
picture of the, I think, back.
I think it shows in the
So I think I know what the
Yeah,
thought
there we go.
is.
It's
So-
the TSP project right here.
So that green dotted line, which is not exactly the alignment that we've
Okay.
landed on now with the New Myers
Yes,
Road,
yeah,
we're,
Yeah, okay, so it would loop around back behind and connect there. All right.
yeah, I think the new thought is, there's several options about how Loader Road would kind of come around after High School Lane, if you will. So it follows High School Lane and then kind of turns east and crosses with Loader Road. And really what we'd like to do is square up Loader Road in a way that doesn't have that angled corner, especially with the signalized intersection.
I think part of the challenge from, part of the challenge for us to fully understand it is because we are basing we're basing a lot of our conversations and discussion about the way Beaver Creek Road is right now when we're driving it, which is without a connection at Myers going through, which is without that High School Lane connection.
It's hard.
And so it's a mess without those. And so I guess now in looking at that a little bit, where I understand that, okay, that makes a little bit more sense that 3-lane or that 5-lane may not need to go all the way to the high school or all the way to Henry C. or all the way to Glen Oak, because those other means of getting to 213 and Malone Avenue are in place then when they're not now. And that's part of why it's such a big mess at Beaver Creek in the morning and afternoons. So I guess I can definitely see with those other pieces, maybe it's not as crucial to have that 5-lane section go all the way. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know until we're there and we actually see it. But just knowing the way it is now, and I know that just when Myers Road goes through, that for someone working at the high school, that is going to be like the most amazing thing possible. I mean, when that goes through, we might think, oh, geez, there's no problem.
Wow, John, you're really.
happen, the better idea we're really gonna have to understand the effect that it has on that whole area. And I think that's the challenging piece of it, because without really thinking through that, it's like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna possibly make it with just 3 lanes in that area? So I guess those are my concerns. I'm still a little confused about the Holly Lane connection and how that's envisioned in the future, if it is. Because I definitely have heard the comments from citizens and even up here about the concern of using Holly Lane more. But I haven't really seen any visual that shows me how that connection really is envisioned way in the future, if there is a connection envisioned.
So just real quickly,
I see the blue line.
Beaver Creek Road concept plan does not go to Thayer Road. And so there's a section that's outside the urban growth boundary.
Yes.
So the first step is one day a road will connect to Thayer. And then from Thayer, how does it connect up to Maple Lane? And so I think on our end, the first piece is to make sure that we, if even the area in Thayer gets developed, that there's opportunities to connect in to that proposed Hollow Lane extension here. Because if we do not allow dead ends here, then the only way in and out of this area would be through Thayer. So providing more of that connectivity. And then at that question is, how do you design kind of that alternate route? So it really is low volume. It's an alternate route. It's not a primary route. You're going through an area where you're going to choose 213 ideally over that route. And so how do you use design? How do you make sure it's for local traffic only, really for people trying to get to and from north and south without having to get back onto 213?
Yeah, and I mean, I have philosophical concerns about dead-ending the street at the end of the UGB, because to me, that's only going to encourage growth that where we don't want it. And it shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be looking willy-nilly to be expanding the urban growth boundary. But again, that's a philosophical discussion for not this session, but I guess, are you done?
For now.
I mean, I have a higher level. I'm going to start real high level with a concern. I was a little concerned about the memorandum in terms that, to me, it seemed like there was a predetermined outcome. That there was the outcome and then you work backwards. I would like to see in the future the reports balance more of the alternatives. So we got some encouraging statements about roundabouts, but then there was the comma and the but. I think that we probably have enough brain power on this commission to be able to look at alternatives in terms of how we think it's going to impact the community. And it's not that your input is not warranted. I just think the recommendations were a little much. I would have preferred, here's the positive things about the roundabout, here's the negative things about the roundabout, here's the positive things about this, here's the positive things like that. Again, I'm talking very high level, and I'm not talking about just transportation reports, I'm talking about all of them. We don't really get the alternative options, if there are any, or we don't get the other side of it. And I think we need to see the other side of it. What I have a concern about is primarily, we're talking about we can't build roundabouts in incremental pieces. I think if we decide that we want to have roundabouts, then I think the city needs to step up and build it now and get the money back later, because that's the only way it's really going to happen. I wouldn't see us doing an incremental, and I don't want to do a 3-lane alternate and accept something that's adequate. I would like to go to the higher standard, us to be more proactive, to look ahead. And so if we need the roundabout there and it works there and it's better for me, I think, to say, let's spend the money now in 2019 dollars or whatever dollars there are, rather than wait till it's $2030 when it could be even more expensive. I think we have to just look broader. We need to look at a broader approach rather than focusing on what's the now and what's the immediate. I don't know if the 5-lane section works. I don't know if the 3-lane section works, but I have seen roundabouts in other communities, and I think that they are an effective tool. And I think that if we want it, we should put money aside and we should just build it. I think we need to support incremental growth in the concept plan areas instead of, starting at the very end and having it come back. We need to look at how we are developing in this particular concept area and do it in an incremental manner rather than kind of all over the place. And I feel really strongly, as you know, about Holly Lane. I was the lone commissioner that voted against us putting it in the TSP because I don't think we need it. And again, as I stated earlier, unless we can change the geology of Holly Lane, it's going to be what it is. I don't think it can be widened. I have looked at that street. I have driven that street at very slow speeds, like 5 miles an hour, at an off-peak time, believe me, not when school was in session. And I just don't see where it's going to go. I've talked to some county people about, where is the right-of-way? Has a survey ever been done so we can, because there's people whose houses are like right there, and I'm sure they don't know where their property is. But again, I think we need to be thinking really super big picture. And I do appreciate your work, Carl. Obviously, I've known you for a long time, and your hair wasn't white or gray when I met you. So,
Amen, sister.
yes, and obviously, I haven't changed a bit, so, that just goes to show you, clean living here.
So with that misleading last comment, the chair recognizes Commissioner Wiles Smith.
Thanks. In order to be brief, because it's getting late, I have a question for John. Do you have a plan for revising the capital improvement project list and where things may need to get added to that list in order for us to be collecting SDCs to work on some of this stuff?
So we just did one before this commission started. I don't remember the date, but it seemed like last year. Time flies. So we just did one. We added, for instance, we added the project that came out of the Highway 213 Beaver Creek Road project. So we carried that, or we were able to bring that project forward and a couple other concept plan projects. So just did it. Does that mean we couldn't add a project to the list? We can add projects to the list, but what's really important in a project like this, where there may be millions of dollars at stake, we'd want to, recalculate and justify the change in the SDC value. And, as far as SDCs go, we talked to you a little bit about water, and we got stormwater coming up. So our focus is on the utilities right now before we jump into the transportation again.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of responding to the comment that you made earlier that some of these projects needed funding, but that there was no funding plan for them and they weren't on the capital improvement list. And so it kind of sounded like, I couldn't tell if that was this is a recommendation that we'll probably have to revisit this and add it to the list, or so I was just trying to figure out what that's
So
at.
the colored lines on this slide here in particular, there's projects listed for each of those, and there's several $1 million worth of transportation projects out in the corridor out there. But I think the difference is taking kind of a 3-lane section, and that's not a very, expansive 3-lane section to something else. Yeah, we'd want to relook at those numbers now. Maybe if we built it as a city project and just kind of, should step up and just build it, then I think we should, really think about accelerating that pretty quick. I don't think it would necessarily be SDC qualifying. We probably ought to look at other mechanisms, but yeah.
And then can you return to the last slide where you're trying to look for direction for us so that we can get to what we're trying to get to? So you want to know if we are I'm just trying to recap so we can move forward. You're trying to get to some direction as to whether or not we want you to look at other 3- and 5-lane configurations.
And if you want us to go back out to have more public engagement.
I think the answer to that is probably yes. It's a yes for me on that.
It's a yes for me, and I'll say why when you're done.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just trying to step us forward.
Okay, well, I watched the planning commission last night, and quite honestly, I keep seeing and hearing the word adequate. Yes, adequate, And what I don't want to do is not be prepared for the future. And I'm going to try and keep this brief. I agree with almost everything Commissioner McGriff said about preparation for the future and the need. If the roundabout is the way to go, do it. I don't want to get locked into 3 lanes only to say in 20 years I needed 5 and I can't acquire those lands. So even if we build for 3, can we acquire the lands to do 5?
Right.
Can we widen that without having to get into You know, now there's utilities there and utility poles and people's buildings are there. I mean, and if Loader Road is correct, you know, and I don't know that, but short story, and quite honestly, I don't understand the fascination with center islands. You know, sometimes my goal is to move traffic. I understand safety, I want safety, but, you know, if I asked, would you like to be stuck in traffic viewing the center island, or would you like to be moving along in 5 lanes? Maybe I'll get 5 lanes, so I'm voting to look at 5 lanes. Anybody else?
I would just comment, I agree with that. I've always growing up, I remember thinking my dad complaining that it's like, they always wait to ride in a road when the traffic is so bad. They should have widened it, 20 years ago. And so
Right.
it goes to that idea that if maybe one of the alternatives is that we look at the 3 lane, but we're purchasing right away for 5, or maybe it's that we're building the intersections instead of roundabouts, because I think that was in your analysis, because it's easier to expand later on and it's more cost effective with intersections versus roundabouts. So I do want us to be forward looking in our alternatives. And it sounds like we've given you the direction you need. Do you need more than that?
I think the only thing I've heard that I'm a little, and maybe Carl, you can, but roundabout for a 3-lane section versus roundabout for a 5-lane section is a
Very
massive
different. Yeah.
difference. And what I think I have heard through different conversations is we're recommending signalization, which in a 3-lane section is typically going to be more than that, right? You may have a right turn lane or something associated with that, but I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't have talked at all about roundabouts if it was a 5-lane section we were talking about. Is that
Would not have talked about them at all?
right? Right.
Well, they can be done, but it is a significantly different structure. I mean, instead of 1 lane around the circle, it's 2 lanes around the circle. It's a much bigger circle. So you consume a lot more land, so the cost and land acquisition changes quite a bit.
What's the size of the one at Stafford? I thought it had 2 lanes. It maybe has 1 lane going around with lanes flipping off on either side.
The one next to the Rolling Hills Church, that one.
It's
No, but Wanker's
I'm bored.
Wanker's Corner, I don't know where the one is.
It's got one in the middle, and then you kind of got a free right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. There's one that you can go all the way around and then you
Right.
split off to different ones. Plus, the other ones I've been on are the ones in Bend. And on the way up to Mount Bachelor,
Right.
you go through several of them.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I'm just saying, with the volumes that we're talking about here, they would be larger than the one in Lake Oswego.
And so be it.
Yeah.
The one extra thing that we're thinking on planning is there are some parts of Beaver Creek Road where both sides will be, could be improved as part of a current planning, but as you get closer to Glen Oak Road, there's a fair amount of existing single family. And that was, and designing a roundabout gets a little bit close. And that, I'm not a transportation engineer, we haven't laid it out, but there's always this question of, if it's much harder to get right away from one side of a street or the other based on knowing that that won't be developed anytime soon. That's one thing to think about is as we get to the Glen Oak, it gets a little harder to build a 5-lane roundabout.
Don't you think that eventually when the traffic volumes continue, those people aren't going to want to live there anymore? I mean, not that I'm saying we should buy them, but it's kind of a little bit oppressive now. And I know which one you're talking about, the homes right there. It's pretty oppressive in that intersection. That's my opinion. You don't have to answer that.
People choose to live in
I know they do,
different
but
places.
they didn't expect that type of development when they bought out there. It was much lighter traffic, way lighter.
So do we have what we need for tonight? You have direction?
Sounds
Everybody's
like
clear?
What is it?
Yeah, the only other thing I would
What is the
add
direction?
is our planning commission chair is in the audience. And one of the things you mentioned was this parallel outreach versus moving forward with the planning commission and the legislative work. I can only imagine if I were on the planning commission, that I would prefer for what's coming to the planning commission to have the transportation piece ironed out a little bit more, because otherwise they're probably going to get tons of public comment about the transportation that's presented before them, knowing that it may change later. And I don't know, I feel like that maybe that's a disconnect of kind of like you're presenting one thing to the planning commission and then coming back with a different version. So I just think we should think long and hard. If there's, I don't know about that timing, but I guess I would prefer for them to be more in alignment so that what's presented to the planning commission is more transparent on what's going on the transportation front, or maybe there's a delay in making sure that what's presented is closer to what's gonna come. Does that make sense? Versus them being two different products?
Just so you know, there's some policy questions that need to be asked related to, that I think might be able to be separated and kind of move forward with some policy questions and some codes.
Sure.
I mean, we could say we're just talking about this topic tonight.
Yeah.
That'd be one way to kind of still kind of work on simmering issues that may not be directly related to transportation, was one of my thoughts.
Right, so if you can parse that out, that's fine. I'm just giving you a little bit of feedback of that. I don't want folks to come before us later on and say, well, what you presented to the planning commission is different than what you're presenting now. And so I just, let's think about that alignment of what we're presenting and how we want to line up our public outreach on this particular item versus holding items. I know it's late and I'm not explaining that very well, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting too, one thing to think about with all the discussions that we're having on Malala Avenue as it relates to bike and ped safety. You know, a lot of the work that went into this early on in the Beaver Creek concept plan was creating, you know, you're talking 12 to 1,400 housing units on the south end of the Beaver Creek concept plan area, transitioning through a Main Street area up into an employment area with connections to the high school and Clackamas Community College. So just, you know, being thoughtful about how we design, if we're going to go a 5-lane section, you know, potentially wider than that at intersections, how do you, you know, how do we account for what we hoped would have been that cross pedestrian traffic between the educational and learning institutions, both for bike and ped, both ways, whether it's from the homes to those educational institutions or from the homes, let's say south of Glen Oak, across into the natural areas that are potentially going to be in this area. So, you know, I don't exactly remember the discussion, but, you know, there was some discussion about trying not to be a barrier, right? And so, and I think street design and speed all play into how much of a perceived and real barrier that is to cross that. So just not only the vehicular, and I get wanting to move people, but how do you balance that against what we're seeing now on Malala? How do you come in after the fact and try to make it a safer bike ped facility?
So all being said and done,
Got
make
it.
sure we're clear. Are we exploring a 5-lane possibility, or proceeding with a 3 with probably acquiring land for a 5? Is that our direction?
Is that the,
Is that,
I think it's,
That's not my direction.
what's your
but
direction?
I don't support either one of those. I think we need to take a better approach to looking at roundabouts.
Well, the roundabout will be dictated by the number of lanes, correct?
Well, but they can come back with some alternatives on how those could be done.
Okay. So you want more information before providing ultimate guidance?
To me, it seems like it's the $64,000 unanswered question.
Okay. I suppose we need a little bit.
So, okay, I guess we've got a 3-lane section, and we know, so you got a 3-lane or a 5-lane, right? So you want us to look at both,
I do.
and then, you
Or
know,
at least
we
look at
could
the
at least,
acquisition of land to widen it without difficulty in the future.
right.
right? And then we've got some question about a light versus a roundabout. I think we've got a pretty good understanding of a 3-lane roundabout. I guess we
Yep.
could try to look at what a 5-lane
Would look like.
looks like in a template, high level.
To me, that it's pretty easy to get cost information, tell you how effective that facility will move traffic, those kind of things. We advocate for roundabouts all the time with regard to pedestrian safety but we've not ever, at least in this agency, considered a 5-lane scenario where you introduce a roundabout there. I think the existing signal at Myers Road is a signalized intersection today. We've got a development approval right now for expanding that signalized intersection. So the other thing that I struggled with the roundabout was a roundabout at Loader, signal at Myers, roundabout at Glen Oak. It just doesn't flow well. I wouldn't, we talk about trying to interconnect signals, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was predetermined or not necessarily, but that's kind of how I queued it up in my head, was it seems problematic.
Make it work.
The end result is we know it needs to be explored. We're not going to design it tonight.
No, I don't want to try to design it.
I know
Right,
it's-
I just think that, yeah, we'll have to work on that, but we can definitely bring cost information and performance information.
I do have a public engagement question. What level of public engagement are you expecting or you want to see out of this process? Just so I have a kind of barometer of what would be a win in regards to making sure that we've reached out and talked to the people that need to be involved in this conversation.
Well, weren't roundabouts already in the plan? So is that anything different than what the plan had suggested to begin with?
Just this larger question of what is is the design that has been approved, is that what we still want as our community? And kind of having that larger, higher question.
I think in the plan, my recollect, and we can check this as well, was intersection controls. It showed circles, right? At every intersection where we're gonna do some kind of intersection control, that was the symbol. And I think a lot of people have jumped to, that's a roundabout. At the time, at the time of the TSP, and I don't think I've seen necessarily specific intersection controls on Beaver Creek in the concept plan. Do you remember?
I can take a look. I know there weren't warrants for signals back in 2008.
So.
Why don't you guys work through
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
The hour runs, we have one more challenging subject. I know this commission in the past has suffered from fatigue at the end of the night. I'm going to call a short break, and we're going to come back, and I can tell you, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to try to bring this meeting to a conclusion, because decisions get worse throughout the night.
I don't know if we have direction on the Holly, I mean, we're kind of saying avoid Holly Lane, but I don't know if that's,
And again, that may depend on what we're going to do. I know what it was said, but what, 3 lanes, 5 lanes, Holly Lane, no Holly Lane? Let's revisit it next time.
Again, John, I just want you to know that I have sat through, as you have, many, many, many hours of testimony by Christine Kaczynski about Holly Lane, and we have looked at that, looked at it. The LiDAR maps don't lie, and I just, again, I think in good conscience for me, I cannot recommend that we continue to support Holly Lane. I just, looking into the future, I prognosticate that there's going to be, we're flirting with disaster. I just have concerns about it, based on everything that I've heard over the many, many years of information that's been brought in. And I think, connectivity is fabulous, but sometimes places where we think it should connect just don't really work. So I really, really hope that you can look at that with that eye, because, I'm sure Christine will be back here with all of her neighbors telling us everything that we've heard. So, not that I don't want to hear it again, but we know. I mean, she's kind of wondering whether it's sunk in.
Okay. I'm going to declare a short break. We'll come back and deal with the last subject on the agenda.
Chris Graham.
I haven't seen him in a long
I would
time.
like some of your input.
All good,
on
Katie?
this whole shelter thing, and I don't think that they talked to you. Well, we will have that conversation.
We're on, whenever you're.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We have a final item to deal with tonight. I know the evening grows late. I'm trying not to, in deference to the people that come here, I definitely want to give them at least their opportunity to present the information they've gathered. So the subject is 19-467, Code Amendments discussion on shelters. And it was by Director Laura Turway. I suppose our good friend Pete Walter will be standing in.
Thank you, Commissioner President O'Donnell. So this evening, we're circling back with you on shelters. And what we had done is we went away and worked with Nancy Ide and Dan Fowler, Mike Day from the police department, and we got some direction from Vahid Brown of Clackamas County, Homeless Services Liaison. And we also have, so what we put together tonight is a summary of the conversation that we had. If the commission pleases, those people are in the audience and can be part of the discussion. And
Certainly welcome.
Let them up to sit in new seats.
Yeah.
And I'll kick it off.
And my caution is, because as the hour grows late, we may not reach a decision tonight, but I at least want to gather the information.
Correct.
Are we looking at presentations or are we looking at comments? The reason I'm
We don't really have a
asking.
presentation.
Okay, good, because I'm really not interested in a presentation.
Yeah,
No, we're not.
here to
We've
participate.
said everything that we,
Okay.
I should speak for myself. You know, I've said everything that, you know, as far as based on the homeless coalition.
Yes. If you-
Pete has a presentation.
I have a
Yeah.
brief presentation to
Yeah.
summarize.
At what point do you want to make that? You want these speakers to go first?
I would like to make that now,
Yeah.
if I could, and then we can get into a discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
And I'll try to
perfect.
keep my comments brief.
And I know we've all read your report, so.
Okay, so,
We don't
this
need to
is a
reread.
summary of that.
Okay, please do.
Yeah. So the background on this is we've been talking about homeless shelters as they have been recommended by the Planning Commission in the past. I'm going to go about talking about that. We're going to talk about the conditional use review process, the conditional use fee, and certain other things. So the 2018 Planning Commission recommendation was for shelters to be a conditional use in the medium density zones for less than 10 beds, high-density residential zones, which is the R2 zones for shelters that have 11 beds or more, in the mixed-use downtown, except within the downtown design district, and in the mixed-use corridor. So what we did was we pulled all of that code language out of the code amendments and adopted the equitable housing code. And if we move forward with these code amendments, we would tentatively adopt this separately on September 4th. We had originally discussed and have put in your packet the definitions for day shelters, emergency shelters, and warming and cooling shelters, as well as shelter standards. The thrust of the memo that I put together was first to ask the question of the commission, was the intent for a conditional use process to be applied to any shelter irrespective of type or use, because that seems to be in line with what the Planning Commission recommendation, and that was what we heard from the majority of the commissioners at the last meeting. If that is the case, the differences and the nuances and the definitions for shelters is not as important, because the conditional use process is a discretionary process that looks at unique aspects of land uses and their impact on the adjacent neighborhood. The question of the conditional use fee is a separate question. If the decision is to waive or modify the review fee for conditional uses, that can be done via a separate resolution of the commission if the feeling is that that conditional use fee is an inordinate burden on that particular shelter, and that money that they would otherwise spend on the conditional use fee can then be spent on whatever services they provide to the people that they're sheltering. So the group discussion that we all had was kind of based on that philosophy that there would be a conditional use for all shelters, and that certain ones of the shelter definitions were unnecessary. The current conditional use fee is $4,091. There's an associated traffic impact analysis fee for conditional uses, which is $2,207. The recommended shelter definition, which is an umbrella definition that we're talking about, and Vahid Brown actually recommended that we change the term housing here to overnight sleeping or daytime accommodation. And this definition would not only apply to homeless shelters, but it would apply to other types of shelters that are available for whatever use, you know. So if we looked at emergency shelters, that's the next definition we discussed. Emergency shelters in this definition are ones that are declared by the City Commission by resolution. And the feeling of the group was that emergency declarations are at the discretion of the City Commission. It's within your powers to declare an emergency in a situation, and that includes suspending certain parts of the code if necessary to facilitate a response to a particular emergency. As such, this definition isn't really necessary. Not only is the definition kind of narrow in terms of how it's worded towards homeless shelters only, but there are other types of shelters that you would have to consider declaring in the event of a natural disaster or some kind of thing. So when I write recommendation here, I'm talking about this feeling of the group discussion that we had, and it's coming through staff from the group. The second definition that we didn't feel was necessary anymore was that of the shelter and temporary warming and cooling shelters, you know, which has certain temperatures that trigger it. The recommendation from the heat in this case was that it said when the outside temperature is, we would just change that to predicted to be. The advantage of having a separate definition here would only be if you were going to treat this type of shelter differently. Like if it didn't require conditional use, it was otherwise a use by right in the zone district and that sort of thing. And then similarly, day shelters, which is a shelter utilized between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And the group did not recommend any changes to the language of this definition, but we don't feel it's that necessary because the conditional use process would apply in the case of that as well. As far as shelter standards, they would be applicable to any shelter, whether or not it was conditional use. It includes a written community engagement plan, which describes in detail the internal operations of the shelter, the population to be housed, their capacity, their beds, hours of operation, an explanation of how they would address concerns or complaints, and their process and criteria for selection of guests. And then that also includes an obligation on the part of the shelter to meet yearly with the neighborhood association and hold a meeting, and the notice of that meeting goes to the city and property owners within 300 feet. We can discuss any additional standards the city commission would like to discuss, but this is what the planning commission recommendation came out for. And then we have talked about what constitutes a service or a bed. So some of these things, definitely in a conditional use process, a lot of this information would be coming out from the applicant and requested as part of the application. Specific information about that would be part of the written community engagement plan. But there is also a consideration of, you know, existing laws that protect privacy, health information, and fair housing that needs to be considered. And the internal operations and the service provision that is the mission of that shelter should be taken into account. And the recommendation here is not to have separate definitions for these things because they may vary widely, but also for that information. Also wanted to talk about the Father's Heart and the process that resulted in that operation. The site that it's on is a mixed-use corridor zone. It has operated since June 2012. The prior use there was for Clackamas County Sheriff's Day Community Corrections Program, probationary and classes and things like that. We asked for a very detailed description of what was going to be proposed there at that time. And based on that description, we felt that that use was a similar use to what was there previously and fell into these categories in the zone district, which are permitted. That included offices for government use and personal services and educational services. The other uses that go on in that facility include providing sack lunches, daytime rest areas, and various other things. And Robin, you can probably talk more to that, I'm sure. And so if shelters are made a conditional use, Father's Heart would become a lawfully pre-existing a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming use in that zone. And any expansion or further development, for example, if they asked for an overnight use for shelters, that would trigger modification or conditional use permit in that situation. Other than that, and that's if we decide to make it all uses conditional, all shelters conditional. So that's all I have to say on this. The tentative schedule, if we get direction on this, is to move forward with an adoption of the code for shelters on September 4th. And then for the other outstanding items, we would just continue those as necessary. Thanks. Can I answer?
Commissioner Ide, do you want to speak?
Hi, Nancy Ide for the Homeless Coalition of Clackamas County. I really have said everything that we've discussed in our meetings and so forth, so I think that you have everything there. I would like to add, though, that I really appreciate Laura Turway and Pete Walters' time that they gave us as we discussed all these things, and the recommendations that they've proposed here are right on target. I feel that we as a group have come, at least we feel that we've compromised. We have, we started off with wanting everything permitted, right? And so we are willing to go the conditional use route if that is what you feel is the best way to go. So I just hope that there's some give and take on both sides here. We just know that there's emergencies too that come up, and as the point in time count recently pointed out, that the warming centers actually lowered the number of unsheltered people over the last 2 years. So it's a very valid, important thing to have in our community. So that's really all I have to say.
Thank you.
I don't really have much to add to that, except that I just want...
Please state your name.
I'm sorry. Robin Schmidt, Executive Director of the Father's Heart. The only thing that, when he was going through the slides, when they talked about the Father's Heart, possibly an overnight shelter, I just want to reiterate, we have no interest in becoming a 24-hour shelter or night shelter. We want to continue to be a day shelter.
Okay.
So if anybody ever gets concerned about that, that's not...
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else present that wishes to speak? Mayor Fowler.
Hi, good evening. Dan Fowler, members of the commission. I echo, a co-chair of the Clackamas County Homeless Solutions Coalition. I echo Nancy's comments. I want to thank Laura and Pete for their work. They really pulled all of us together with Officer Day and Vahid Brown, and really had some thoughtful discussions on just getting something done. There's a need in the community, and I think this will help meet that need. So we support the recommendations as they've been presented.
Okay, thank you. My feeling, and I'll just put this out there, I know the evening grows late, I know that I wanted to gather everybody's statements tonight. I know that once we embark on a discussion of this 5-page summation plus what was offered tonight, it's going to be a long, complex discussion. I'd rather do it in one piece than do it and get interrupted at the 10 o'clock hour. So if the commission is in support of that, I would move this to the next meeting. I would like to make it item number 1, so we're not dealing with it at the late hour, and just do it. Just get it done, make a final decision. Can that be done?
Suggesting the next work session?
I'm suggesting bring it to commission. We've got, as Nancy I just said, we've got all the information we're gonna have.
Yeah, I mean,
Make a decision. It's time to make a decision. So just bring it to city commission, make it item 1, and make a decision.
Well, I got a question for you all. I mean, did you come in here tonight with some clear ideas, not things up for like a lot of discussion, but like real, I like this, I don't like this, I like this,
No.
I don't like this?
No, I did not.
I did.
Okay, I know I did too.
I did.
I felt that there was more that was needed, which is why I asked for this memo again.
Okay.
right, and just to add, the memo from April 24th is where we compared definitions from various jurisdictions, and then the Joint Office of Homeless Services, which is
The one in Portland. yeah.
the one in Portland, and A Home for Everybody, I think, is the project name, but it's the Joint Office of Homeless Services, Portland, Multnomah County, and Gresham. So that's where that information is.
And I don't want to start down a detailed discussion because it's really
Right.
easy to do that.
Right.
It's so easy to do that. And I've got mine, I've got specific questions, I got specific comments.
Well, maybe
And
what I need to do is finish going over this again and sit down with staff before we bring this back, whenever that is, and then I might feel more comfortable about approaching it.
And I think everyone here have been long-suffering in their continued offering of information. Let's, as Eddie Alec used to say, you make a decision. So let's make a decision next time up.
I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Besides Mike Day, was there anybody else
Right.
from the Oregon City Police Department that was consulted or got a chance to review this material?
I'm not aware that there was.
I would suggest that we do.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Commissioner Smith.
On this, a similar topic, I'm under the impression that there's a policy coming forward at some point from the police department or some, a future agenda item maybe about, a homeless
Yes.
policy?
We wanted a discussion from Parks and Police just on it. I think it was an update from Parks and Police about homelessness.
I'm just wondering if there's any overlap between whatever that topic is and what this topic is that we should know about. I don't know that, I heard that on the radar, but I don't know
That's a
if
good point.
there's any pieces of that that are intertwined with
Yeah.
this before we tackle this, because if we tackle this and nail some answers out and then we get presented with something else that ties into it, I think
Police department needed to be
we need to
consulted.
connect that together to see if there's any.
One of the things that had come up was in the, your goal-setting session and at the budget, there was a lot of questions about homelessness.
Right.
And so we thought we probably need to just have a presentation on kind of what between us and parks, sort of what it looks like in the community. It was not going to cover shelters, but it would,
The broader
it's
topic.
probably, there's probably some stuff that you would like to, I don't know.
And I think, traditionally, we had a lot of stats in the budget document. When we had the budget hearings with the budget committee, there were a lot of stats in there that Chief Band would usually bring, and this time we decided to pull that out, and then we would be doing that in a presentation, and that was focusing on kind of the impacts of homelessness from what we were dealing with from the police department standpoint, from Parks and Rec standpoint, because you remember earlier on, we were having a lot of issues with some of the issues in the parks that were happening, some of the homeless camping that we were seeing throughout the community, what Mike Day was doing in terms of reaching out to those folks. So what we have on here is just a kind of a presentation discussion about
homelessness and what we're seeing in those two departments. So I don't think there's a specific policy tied to shelters that was going to come out of that discussion
I
that
mean,
we're
just
aware of.
from that, I can tell that some of that might be useful in the whole conditional use topic, because we're seeing, where the budget money is, what is being allocated to deal with some of these issues versus that. So that I can see the overlap there, but I just want to make sure there wasn't any other overlap that we might need to know when we're.
I don't think it wasn't that intent. There certainly could be coming out of it, but I don't think we're intending to do
I
that.
didn't even really know what the topic was, as I knew there was something. All right.
Just one quick comment. Have you received the point in time report for Clackamas County yet?
I have not.
It was just out, so I have
Find it online
in my,
pretty easy.
I'm sorry?
You can find it online
Yes, it
pretty
is.
easy.
I have the link just in my email. If you don't mind, I'd like to just send that to you.
Yeah,
I think that it's just 4 quick page report, all graphed and so forth, very easy to read. And it is very eye-opening, and I think it would be very helpful in your deliberation.
I would suggest when you look at 19, look at 2017, because you'll see the point in time count. At Oregon City, we had 200 people that they counted. In 2019, it's over 300.
Yeah.
And other cities had significant decreases. It looks
However,
like
we
they're
are
coming
the-
our way.
We are the county seat where all the services are too.
Sure.
I think that would be more appropriate to send it to Katie, as you have done
Yeah,
that.
Katie can distribute it to us.
Yeah,
I'll send it directly to you as well. I'll send it to Katie and
yeah, I'd
And
rather
Tony.
just have it go through Katie. as we've
Thanks
been
for once
directed.
again taking your time to come.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel bad for them coming and us not talking
So is
This is
this,
not going to be a 30-minute discussion.
so right now, we probably have this continued to a date certain, September 4th?
Right now, it's September 4th, so on September 4th, we probably have to think about a work session instead.
So do you want to deal with this at the September 4th city commission meeting, or do you want another work
I
session?
think so.
I think, as Nancy has said,
No,
you've got
I
all
think
the
I'd like to
information.
hash it out at a work session and then
I'm not-
streamline right through the hearing. I don't think I'm not feeling comfortable with that. I'm sorry, guys. It's whatever you guys decide, but I'm just telling you, I'm not comfortable with going from this directly to
So
any
you're
sort of-
saying a work session prior to the regular meeting?
Sure,
The
I don't
same
know when,
day?
I don't know when it would happen. That we've been able to successfully hammer
Well,
stuff
let's pull the
out,
commission.
successfully hammer stuff out at a work session, then we can go straight to a hearing and go, boom, okay, we figured it out.
Let's poll the commission. Who's ready to do it at a commission procedure to make a decision based on the information on hand as presented by everybody present and in this report? I know I am. I'm ready. Does anybody else want a work session? Because I don't need another work session.
No, this was
Well-
wasn't quite the work
I
session.
mean, if the work session's the same night as the meeting, I guess I don't have that much of a problem with it, but if we're continuing that to 2 more meetings, I do have a problem with that.
Well, logistically, Tony,
I think, let's not worry about it. I mean, the timing we can deal with and the continuances we can deal with. The 4th, we're supposed to have a joint work session with PrAC for the Clackamas Park
jeez.
boat ramp.
That'll
and
be
then-
an easy one.
So I think you're just starting at 6 with the commission meeting at 7. You're not
For
going
the
to fit both.
Clackamas what?
The boat ramp?
Boat ramp.
Clackamas Park?
That'll be a mess.
Oh, yeah, you were talking about that before I came on, I recall.
So I think it's just more important, if you'd like a work session, let us know, and we'll figure out a date to have a work session. We'll deal with all the continuance that we have to. Or if you're ready to go, we'll bring it back on the
I'm
floor.
ready to go, but I've got other commissioners up here with me, so let them speak their piece. You wanna-
Well, I think you're saying though that we would still, even if it came before city commission, we would still have a lengthy discussion
Oh, we're
on
going
what
to.
the
Yeah.
final, how we're
Certainly.
gonna get there.
Certainly. I don't feel I need additional information. I feel, much as Nancy I does, I've got everything I need, and I'm gonna make a decision based on this information. And
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I think, in that sense, yes, I think I have everything I need. And whether or not we're all in agreement.
that's,
We'll
that's,
get there.
that's what this
Totally different
discussion
thing,
is.
but-
If people want a work session before, then let's make sure what we schedule that night we can accomplish. Because we've been loading the agendas and we're not getting through them, and I don't wanna do that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem having a work session beforehand. I'm just not prepared based on the Let me just say, I'm not prepared based on the information I have, because I think,
Could you submit specific
I-
questions to Mr. Walter that he can answer them?
I'm going to schedule an appointment with Pete.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather not
What
have
do
the
you want?
discussion here.
Well, if you have that conversation and get answers, at least have answers for a regular meeting, then can't we just have the regular meeting? And if at some point during that discussion, we don't come to an agreement, then we don't come to an agreement, but that can happen.
You guys go with whatever you want. I've
think
already,
that's where I
I've already
feel.
said how I feel about it, so I don't think I need to say anymore.
So with that, Commissioner McGriff, contact Pete Walter. If she's comfortable with the regular meeting, we do that. If not, do we schedule a work session prior to his regular meeting, to a commission meeting?
I feel more comfortable with that,
All right, can we do that?
even if it's a short one.
We need to set it for a date certain so that people know when to come. And so we need to tell people tonight when they need to come. And not leave it to one commissioner's determination, success or failure of a conversation outside the hearing.
That has doesn't have any bearing on it. I said I would feel more comfortable if we had a work session prior to a hearing.
I think we did have a date certain, the last time we did this code, it was continued to 9/4, and that's currently still on the agenda for 9/4. It was planned to be continued at the 9/4 meeting, but that could be changed depending upon what the commission chooses to do. But it was publicly noticed for 9/4.
So what meetings do we have scheduled before our next commission meeting next week? Do we have a work session and executive sessions and urban renewal? I mean, what's
Yes.
all stacked up before that?
All of the above.
All of the above?
And let's see.
That's the way it's been being, so.
I know, that's the thing. We got,
So yeah, urban renewal, and then also executive session.
I leave it to my fellow commissioners. I spoke my piece. I'm ready to roll.
I said what I've said.
Okay, and you're not, so it's 1 and 1.
So can you, do we have time to put it on the agenda, but in the front of the agenda of next week's commission meeting?
For the 21st?
Yes.
Laura, we can certainly put it on, yeah. You mean just under a work session on the 21st? Because we've already continued the hearing to the date certain of September 4th.
Right.
So we're kind of locked into that date for the hearing part. If you wanted to schedule another work session, you could, but the hearing is on September 4th.
I've given my answer. I don't need another work session. I personally am ready to proceed in a commission meeting.
But if it gets on, I think we're confused on this, but if it gets on the agenda, so Commissioner O'Donnell's wanting it to be on an agenda for a commission meeting.
September
At
4th.
that point, we would essentially be doing the same exercise that we would be doing here tonight, right?
You
As a
could,
work
yes.
session of like talking through the
Yep.
issues and giving you direction of what you're gonna bring back to us on September 4th.
On September 4th, you
Or
would
as
do
the
that.
hearing.
Yeah, it's on September 4th. It would be an agenda item, and you guys would be able to deliberate and provide direction to staff on what changes, if any, you'd like to see. We would then incorporate those changes and bring it back on September 18th, which would be your next meeting.
The problem is you don't know what to bring forth to us on the 4th.
We're probably going to
Right.
bring back exactly what you have right here based on the discussion tonight, because we don't really have a whole lot of changes.
So unless we have some type of session where we give you direction,
It's going to be the same of what you saw tonight, and then we would take any changes that are approved by a majority of the commissioners on the 4th. We would incorporate those, and then we would come back 2 weeks later, assuming we got through everything with an ordinance that reflected the desire of a majority of the commissioners.
And that would be the first reading on the 18th and the second reading and the first meeting in
Right.
October.
Or you vote to continue it to another date certain, and we slide another work session in there at some point.
okay,
I'm waiting.
commission meeting's fine with me.
what?
So we have 2 that
Well,
are in
and I
favor.
guess the point.
Because we're just gonna have
and
a table deliberation.
I don't want to just completely ignore what Commissioner McGriff is saying. However, I think you are able to have that,
I will
that
have
staff
it. Yeah,
meeting.
I will have it
They
soon.
should be able to have answers to your questions at that September 4th meeting for our regular meeting to discuss them.
I will schedule it with them as soon as
So
possible.
I think that's fine. We have so many things and we're
not
we're not
accomplishing.
getting through stuff. I mean, there's stuff we have talked about in January that's still not even in the list of, you know, this, what is the list, 40-some things?
Oh, we're very
That we've
thorough.
been talking about for 4 or 5 months, and we're not getting anywhere.
All right,
Okay.
so September 4th?
Understood.
Done. All right, people, September 4th, commission meeting.
Thanks.
Yep.
We have the rest of the agenda.
The rest of the agenda is city manager's report.
I'll just two things real quick. Tomorrow, or August 22nd, Thursday night volunteer recognition concert, end of the Oregon Trail, 6:30 to 8:30. And then Saturday, August 24th, 175th
Hey,
celebration at the end of the Oregon Trail, 10 a.m. to 9:15. Events, carts at EOT all day, band concert that night, and then light show at the end of the night to wrap it up. That's all I have for tonight.
Does anybody want to do commission reports?
Frank, are you going to be doing your presentation at the
Thank
First
you.
City celebration?
What presentation would that be?
The Frank O'Donnell Show about our city history.
I think I'll defer to those more knowledgeable like yourself. I'll yield my time as I often do.
I yielded to Mr.
So the
Mr. Smith.
commission doesn't have a role in any of these two events that you
We're not
just
serving
said?
or anything. We're not, Rocky's not waiting tables. Okay.
No.
Okay.
They just
Staff
spread
will
out,
be
I
there for volunteer recognition. All the directors will be participating in
What
that.
about
That's
the
our role.
24th? I've already been told by Lori that be there or be square.
We'll be there.
If you'd like to volunteer, I'm sure we can find something to do. We don't,
I
we
think
don't.
I volunteered to be in the swag tent for 2 hours or something like that.
Okay.
So looking over individual commissioners' reports, is there anybody that wishes to make a report on any items? I do not. Do you?
No.
All of my meetings were canceled in
My
January.
meetings
you,
have not
Commissioner?
happened, my
I don't have a
meetings haven't
report.
happened yet, so
That being said, we are adjourned.